as a CE engineer with Zeus Numerics Private Limited. So I'm going to talk about how solvers, how to, or more to do with the coupling of multidisciplinary solvers. So it is going to be from a parachute payload system perspective. This I'll talk in detail as I go through the presentation. So the contents are going to include some introduction on what is that parachute payload system, or what is the requirement for such a system, or for such a simulation module to exist. And once we know what are the requirements, we will jump into the modeling elements, the key elements that are present in the simulation model. I have listed a few. So it's the presence of the aircraft, how the aircraft is going to affect the dynamics and trajectory of the payload when payload is still within the aircraft. And then it will talk about how parachute is being modeled, and general aerodynamic modeling of parachute, how the payload can be modeled, and some thoughts on how the connections. That is, there are some links between the present between a parachute and a payload. So how those can be modeled. And finally, we have some atmospheric modeling like wind, density variation. And finally, how to couple all these into one simulation structure is what we have at the end. Yeah. So a brief introduction on the problem statement. So I'll begin probably with the image on the right. So this image typically shows different phases of a parachute payload system dynamics. That is, this payload was sitting inside this aircraft. So a parachute was deployed, and this parachute has actually started pulling this payload, which was well inside the aircraft. And in phase one, this is basically the extraction phase. So these two sets of parachutes are helping the payload to be extracted out of the aircraft. So from here, it moves on to the next phase, which is called as a reposition phase. So these parachutes, which first help the payload come out of the aircraft, now starts pulling a new set of parachutes. So you may see here the second phase. So these parachutes which help the payload extract are generally called as the extraction parachutes, and the ones that typically are used during most of its descent are called as the main parachutes. So the main parachute gradually gets deployed, and you see here that it gets fully inflated, and after some oscillation there are a lot of transient phenomenon that happens. Here, for simplification, it's a very simple representation of what the trajectory phenomenon looks like. But we'll look into more detail what are the transients probably that can happen right from the extraction till touchdown. So this is what we'll be seeing in phase wise, and from the modeling perspective as well. And this is one kind of an extraction. There is another kind of an extraction. This is a parachute assisted extraction of a payload from an aircraft. Another type is a gravity based extraction, where, say, this is the rear of the aircraft. So when it has a certain pitch angle, the object which is placed inside the aircraft, just due to gravity, is going to slide and fall off. And this is the parachute pack, and I can so there is actually a line which connects the parachute pack. So once there is some tension in this line, the parachute is going to get deployed, and it is going to more or less follow the similar phenomenon. Now let's look into what is the requirement for to study or to simulate such a phenomenon. So there are more than there are a lot of reasons to do. First, it is very much important to have such a simulation model to assess whether removing the payload from an aircraft is safe for the parent aircraft as well as for the payload. Secondly, it is very much important to have a simulation structure to understand typically when to drop your payload to say if this is your target point. You can, so using simulation models, you can simulate different scenarios to see. So when you drop at a particular speed at a particular altitude, so this is where your payload is going to hit the ground. So that way you can probably get an idea. I think it is typically called as CEP, circular error probability. So if so that kind of an approach, that kind of an assistance is what this simulation capability is going to give. So here in this representation, you see the payload to be just a rectangular block. So, but this block can be anything. It can be a military truck, it can be a paratrooper jumping, or it can be n number of paratroopers jumping from the rear of the aircraft, as how we generally the military exercises are conducted. So, the simulation model should be generic enough to accommodate a simple payload like this, as well as very complex phenomenon where you can have multiple payloads. So, a paratrooper is a very good example of this. Now we fairly know what is the requirement of such a simulation model. So next, I think next we will look into the different phases. So earlier we saw a generic one. So this is a much more detailed phase. So as we just saw, the first phase is basically the extraction phase where the payload which is sitting inside the aircraft is going to get extracted by the extraction parachute. It extracts the platform. So now in this second image, so you can see that the parachute which was earlier connected to this platform, now it gets gotten disconnected and it has started pulling the next set of parachutes. So this process, this phenomenon is called as a force transfer, meaning force is transferred from this point on the pallet to this parachute which is going to get deployed in some time. So this is the second phase, which is force transfer. So once this happens, as you can see in the next phase, the main parachute is slowly getting deployed. And once the main parachute gets to a certain phase, when it is ready for inflation, at that particular time, the extraction parachute gets disconnected. So there is no connection between this extraction parachute and main parachute. Once the main parachute starts inflating, that's how we see that it is getting disconnected. Now, as we move to the next stage, there is going to be, so from this phase to this phase, there is going to be a lot of oscillation. So the entire system is going to oscillate about a fixed point, and then ultimately it is going to achieve a steady state. There is going to be some stabilization happening, and then there is going to be a steady descent till the payload touches the ground. So this is basically the different phases that we see in parachute assisted drops. So the next few slides will be on what are the typical modeling elements that we generally have. So yeah, as we see here, the very primary modeling element is an aircraft. The aircraft has to be modeled. It's the payload is placed on the ramp, so the effect of ramp has to be taken into consideration. And next we have the payload. That is the main object which is getting dropped. So how payload has to be modeled needs to be looked at. And then how the parachute has to be modeled. So it's not a it's not a very straightforward modeling as the payload. Payload is a very rigid body, but parachute is not like that. It's stored inside a pack, and then the bag opens, and then inflation begins. And there are a lot of complexities associated in modeling parachute, which we will see in forthcoming slides. And then we have the connections. So how these two bodies are connected, they can be connected using, we have parachute as the riser, it has suspension lines, then we have sling, and then we have multiple other connections which are a part of the parachute payload system. So these are the typical elements. Now we will begin into the first element, which is the contact model. So which basically will help us model the dynamics of the payload as long as it is in contact with the parent aircraft. So yeah, so on the I'll start with the image on the left. So the left image, I have a typical. This shows a typical configuration of a cargo and an aircraft roller rail system. So you can see rollers placed. So this is basically the payload. So this is the payload, and I have and there is a rectangular block, thin block, which is called as a pallet. So a payload usually consists, when we say payload, it is the pallet and the payload put together. It is called as an assembly. It is usually visualized as an assembly. So, so the assembly usually contains three elements. One is the payload, and on top of it, there is going to be here. It is considered as a single object, but usually there is one more layer before beneath the payload, which is called as a honeycomb. The honeycomb structure is the one which is going to absorb the shocks when the payload is going to hit the ground. So these three elements put together usually forms the payload assembly. So here the objective of this discussion is how to model the presence of aircraft, that is the aircraft ramp and the payload contact. Now, as we see here, there are going to be rollers at the bottom, which is going to roll over these rails as you see. So these are restraint rails, which means it is your payload is permitted to move only in 3 degrees of freedom, meaning it can move along this x direction. So we'll go to the second image. It can either move in this direction, or it can move in z direction, or it can. The third one is the rotational motion in this plane, defined by the xz plane. So it's only a 3 degree of freedom motion that the payload is permitted to have during this phase of the system. So this is a typical example of how the payload and the ramp contact can be established. So since it is going to be only the motion is allowed only on the symmetric plane, usually what modeling strategies do is they take the center line of this entire payload assembly, and this contact and this center line can be discretized based on some it can be that representative line, which is the center line, can be discretized using a set number of points. So in a similar manner, we can also represent the ramp using one single center line of the ramp. So the payload and the ramp can be, the contact geometry can be one single line discrete within a discretized manner, meaning that as you see here, the ramp can have discrete points. Its line can be represented that way, and contact surface can also be defined in that manner. So you can see here that say there are n number of nodes that are placed on the RAM. So here the ones that are highlighted in the red are the contact nodes, which means these are the nodes that are currently experiencing some tension, or it is what is I mean those nodes are the ones that are in touch with both the payload and the RAM. So this way, and each and every node that is being represented here is treated as a massless spring damper system. So the spring damper system, I'll explain it in the next slide. Here, just visualize it from in a perspective that each and every node probably has some it's transmitting load with respect to, I mean, from the RAM to the payload. So it needs to be identified from that perspective. And ultimately, as the payload starts sliding, this is the initial position. This is the overall ramp length. And say I have a slope angle. So as the payload starts moving, the CG of the aircraft is going to move in the rearwards direction, and there is going to be some pitch angle. So it is because of that that the entire aircraft has a certain or pitch orientation, and due to that the and so it is the ramp has an angle because of that, and this payload as it moves out of the ramp, since CG has crossed this payload, it has already started pitching. So at this position, I have more than one contact point, but at this position, as you may see, I'm having only one contact point. So this is called as a single contact point. That is what is the edge contact point. So this way, the forces that the payload experience due to the presence of the ramp is uh, modeled in for the simulation. So, and one more thing is that you can see that there is actually some force that is being indicated here. That is nothing but the force exerted by the extractor parachute on the payload. So we will look into this in a detailed manner in the next slide. So yeah, so here the reason for having such models is very important for us to predict the loads exerted by the extractor on the payload and the orientation of the payload at the ramp exit. That is, at this particular instant, what is the orientation my payload is going to have is very important from the aircraft safety perspective. So it can have a very high pitch angle, so it can damage the aircraft. So there are multiple safety issues that are associated in such drops. So in order to accurately predict those, such a high fidelity contact model is necessary. Now, as I previously told, each and every active node is represented as a massless spring damper model. So when I say massless spring damper model, I am going to have forces that arise from the spring as well as the damper. Now, as you see here, this K spring is the spring constant, and this is the penetration depth. So whenever a node is penetrating the ramp surface, then there is going to be a spring force. So, and the reason why you see and here this is the damper model. So damper basically, so say for example, when a node penetrates, there is going to be some force in the opposite direction of the penetration, which is why you see a negative sign here and you don't see a negative sign in the damper model. So these both, so whenever a penetration happens, say for example in positive z direction, assuming the positive z is downwards. Now there has to be a force, a reaction force in the opposite direction, and that is what is modeled by this damping force model. And for my spring, I need to know what is the penetration depth, and for the damping force, I need to know what is the velocity at which this penetration has happened. So with this information, I'm going to ultimately calculate my contact force. And once I know my contact force, I can use this force to model to calculate the contact moment. I'll just go back to the previous slide. So say for example, if this is the contact node, so using the formulation which we just saw, spring damper model, I'm going to get a force. So this force will be transformed to this particular body axis system which the payload currently has. And if I know what is the distance between this contact node and the CG, I can calculate the moment which this load is going to impose on the payload. So that way I can model the contact force and the contact moment. Now, there is one more important strategy that needs to be handled. So, say for example, you out of say we have n number of say we have 30 nodes and only 10 are active nodes. So, the summation. So basically, each node is going to have a force value and moment. So the net force and the net moment should be normalized based on the number of active nodes, and those loads are applied at the CG of the payload. So this is a very important consideration that must be taken into account while modeling the contact. So as we see here, the key inputs for modeling this are the spring constant and the damping constant. So there are there are standard practices by which we can get the stiffness and damping model. One is to modeling a multi-body dynamics simulation using commercial softwares like Adams. So through which we can identify what is the stiffness and the damping constant for the aircraft RAM. So on the right, before going to this particular graph on the left, I'll focus on this. So this is a typical contact force and the contact moment plot that generally you will see for a typical parachute payload as it descends. So this image, as you may see here, so this is the moment. This is at say at particular instant. So this is, say, the you can see the graph starts at around 2.5 seconds. Now I'll just briefly come back to this graph. So this is nothing but the extractor force, that is the aerodynamic force experienced by the parachute as a function of time. So at T0, the bag was thrown into the airstream, and at this point, it has just started to inflate, meaning the canopy is going to expand, and it is now at this particular time level at around 3.5 seconds, the parachute is now fully open, and now at this particular point is the extraction switch. What you see is probably is the force transfer. That is what we saw when the force gets transferred from pallet to the main parachute. So now this has a very strong link with this particular contact forces and moments that we see here. So as long as the so for a particular time, that is around 5.25 seconds, you can see that the blue line. So here we will just focus only on the blue line, because the this is a very simple case. It assumes that aircraft has a steady motion, meaning it doesn't have any, so it doesn't have any angular rotation. It is just assumed that it has a 1 degree of freedom, just a velocity, uniform velocity motion, assuming uniform velocity motion for the aircraft. So we will focus only on the blue curve. So we see that the contact force is almost a straight line. So meaning this is nothing but the weight, whatever is the mass of the payload into gravity, which is the weight, that is what is going to be the contact force. So as for a particular time, it is at this particular instant that the cargo actually starts tilting. That is when I say tilt, it is at say a phase just before that. That is the point at which the CG coincides with the ramp edge. So at that instant, your contact force will gradually start reducing, because the entire weight is not being exerted on the ramp. That is why the contact force starts reducing, and ultimately it goes to zero. So when it goes to zero, it indicates that the payload has cleared the ramp. So this is the contact force explanation. Now, as we go to the contact moments, here we see that even though the force remains constant, there is a contact moment which needs to be modeled. So this is a very important modeling phenomenon, because again, I'll just briefly go to this particular slide. So here we see that there is an eccentric force that is consistently acting on the payload. So it is, so you can see that the force is actually acting on one particular location on the payload. Imagine its CG is somewhere here. So due to this eccentric force that is being applied on the payload, there is going to be always a certain contact moment that the ramp is going to exert on the payload, though the contact force may remain the same. So that is what we see here. The force remains the same, but there is gradual increase in the contact moment, and it remains almost constant till the cargo point, when the cargo starts tilting and clears the ramp. So now this image can very well be linked with this particular parachute phenomenon. So at around 3.5, we see that parachute is completely inflated. So that is why you see that the steady state begins at this particular, the steady state contact moment actually begins here. So this modeling is this eccentric, I mean the contact moment due to this eccentric force is very important in modeling the angular orientation of the payload, as long as it is well within the ramp. So these are the main aspects of modeling the parachute and how. So we here the focus is to show that there is a very strong link between the parachute, what we have in the system, and the payload that is being extracted. So the choice of the parachute, what is the size of the parachute to be selected, whether it should have only one canopy or two canopies. So all such decisions are very important in modeling the contact. So yeah, I am now moving to the next slide. So here, so ultimately for a user, this is what is going to be important. What is going to be my pitch angle? What is going to be the pitch rate? So as you may see here, the it is at this particular point that the payload actually clears the ramp. It is so this is what is indicated by this gray dotted line. So you can see here that before clearing the ramp, as the CG payload CG crosses the ramp edge, no, there is a you can see the pitch rate continuously increasing and pitch angle increasing, and then it ultimately it then so this is a continuous evolution till touchdown. In this particular contact, so the it is only till this phase that the user is interested in. So we will just focus on this. So to accurately predict this pitch angle at the end of RAM clear, the contact model has to be of very high fidelity. And this and predicting this pitch angle, its dynamics is very important from the aircraft safety perspective, as I have already told, because a very high pitch angle can have and can result in an impact of the payload on the parachute on the aircraft. So this is a brief introduction on the contact model. Now I'm moving to the next aspect, which is the aerodynamic model for parachute and for a payload. So before parachute aerodynamic jump into aerodynamic model, I'll just briefly explain how the parachute is actually represented in the simulation model. So as we see here, there are two approaches that are generally followed. First, I'll focus on the one on the left, where you see that the canopy of the parachute and suspension lines of the parachute are treated as one single rigid body, which can have any degrees of freedom. It can be modeled as a 3DOF or so from it can either have a 3DOF or a 6DOF motion. So this is the first approach. Second approach is the case where only the canopy of the parachute can be modeled as a rigid body, so with 6 degree of freedom, or it can again it can have any number of degrees of freedom. Whereas the suspension lines can actually be modeled as elastic connections. So we will speak in detail what these elastic connections are in the forthcoming slides. For now, we'll just see these are not bodies, but rather just connections between two bodies. And you can see that these connections from the parachute canopy, they confluence at one single point. This is called as a suspension line confluence point. And this point can be modeled as a point mass, where it can only have just translational components without any angular component. So it can have maximum of 3 degrees of freedom. So basically here we can represent parachute as a two body system, where canopy is one body and confluence point is one body, and these both are connected using these connections as we see here. So these are the two approaches. Now the user can decide which approach to go based on his requirements. Now next slide I'll show you based on what requirement these decisions can be taken. Say for example, okay, let me just quickly show what probably is inflation modeling. Then we will see how the decision is taken. So this image shows the illustration of a parachute inflation. So a parachute is from a bag. The bag gets split open. Parachute comes out of the bag. It's just ready to start inflating. So this is around can be considered as 50% of the inflation. This is 100% inflation. So parachute can have one canopy or it can have multiple canopies, where each and every canopy can have its own suspension lines and its own riser system, all connected to one single payload. So these are the different stages. It can multiple canopies, single canopies. There are a lot of parachute systems, and the user, depending on the weight of the payload, these decisions, how many canopies are to be included in the system, is usually taken. So yeah. So yes. So it is based on this particular phenomenon that the modeling decision is taken. So the image on the left is nothing but a time versus the force generated, aerodynamic force generated by the parachute. So as you can see here, when a parachute begins to inflate, it is going to experience a sudden shock. So this shock is imposed on the parachute due to the acceleration of the payload to which it is connected to. And this Fs, as you see here, it is nothing. It is called as a snatch force. If the user wishes to resolve or to predict this snatch force with a high fidelity, then he can go ahead with the approach 2, which is modeling the canopy separately, and the suspension lines can be modeled in as a connection. So that is the precise. So only when the suspension lines are modeled as connections, you will get a good prediction of this particular snatch force. So it is based on, it is again the user, what I mean, the decision is again depends on user. If the user wants to predict this snatch force, then he can go ahead with approach 2, or if he wants to just see how the entire dynamics works, or if he just wants to simulate a very simple case, he doesn't, but if the user is not aware of such complex phenomenon, he can go ahead with approach 2, where he can just model the parachute where the canopy and suspension lines together are considered as single, just a single thread of body. So yeah, so that is how it is. And now we will go into the inflation modeling. So as we saw in this particular slide, so this is how the parachute starts inflating. So at this moment, it is going to offer some drag to the payload to which it is attached. At this stage, it is going to be even more than the previous stage. At this particular time instant, it is going to reach, by the time it reaches nominal inflation, that is its nominal size, it is going to take some time for this transformation to happen. So this is called as a fill time. Fill time is basically the time taken by the parachute to go from its zero nominal diameter to its actual nominal diameter. So at different phases, the parachute is going to offer different, different drag force. Ultimately, the requirement of a parachute is to offer some drag force on the payload. So at different time instant, I'm going to have different force getting exerted on the payload. So it is for that reason that the drag coefficient of the payload and its instantaneous area are linked together, and it is called as a drag area, which is CD into S. So this drag area is very important in getting in modeling this force profile that you see. So basically inflation of a parachute. So I'll talk about the drag area in the next slide. So here, this is how. So if the user wants to model the aircraft, model the parachute using a finite mass condition. So it is the output of the parachute. I mean, the outputs are going to look something similar to this. If I want to model a condition which is infinite mass condition, then my ultimately the parachute force profile is going to look like this. Now I'll tell you what are these finite and infinite mass scenarios. Finite mass is when the parachute size is good enough to cause deceleration for the payload in consideration, then it is called as a finite mass. If my parachute size is not good enough for me to cause enough acceleration on the payload, deceleration on the payload, then it is called as an infinite mass condition. So you can see here that there is a very brief peak load. So this is Fx is called as the peak load, and this is FC is called as the steady state load of the parachute. But in this infinite mass case, you can see that there is actually a significant rise in effects. That is the opening. This is called as the opening shock load, and then it gradually settles down to a steady state load. So this brief overinflation is because of this infinite mass condition. That is because at this particular moment, the parachute canopy is going to overinflate. Its current diameter is going to be more than its maximum capacity. So, and then it is going to ultimately settle down to its nominal size. That is what basically is the difference between a finite mass and an infinite mass. So there are different modeling strategies for the user to come up with these scenarios and these scenarios, which I'll explain in detail in the next slide. So yeah, so ultimately the force profile that I want, it very much depends on how I am modeling the drag area of the parachute. So the one on the left is the finite mass model equation. The one on the right is the infinite mass model equations. So here, so this is the point where my parachute starts inflating, and it is going. So at this point, the inflation is done. It has reached its nominal diameter, and this is just going to continue. So here the dotted lines you can see is the simulation result, and the thick lines represent the simulation model. So for each phase, I can model what I can. This particular line can be represented using this particular equation. I'm not going into very detailed quantities of what each and every input parameter is. So it say for in a very superficial manner, I can say I can explain these how these parameters affect the curve. Say for example, this parameter called expopen can actually control whether it can be a concave curve, or if the user wants to model inflation as a convex curve, or it can be just a straight line. So this way, each and every input parameter, modeling parameters can actually help us model the way we want to model the drag force generated by the parachute. In a similar manner, here so this is infinite mass condition. The parachute starts inflating, it is going to overinflate in a particular time, and then after overinflation, it is going to settle down to its actual nominal condition. So this is going to take some time. So the user can actually, so this basically TK, what you see is the time period for the parachute to go from its overinflation stage to its nominal stage. So this is again a user input. So user is expected to be aware in order to model such complex scenarios. The user is expected to be aware of what is the typical time it is going to take. So here again for this particular phase there are a set of equations to find out what is the time it is going to take. So that is what is the fill time, as I told. This is the fill time. So so this is the time. This is the fill time for nominal inflation. From here to here, it is for the overinflation to happen, and from here to here, it is again going to get back to its nominal condition. So there are equations to find out what is the time it is going to take and how am I going to model. So this KREF is basically what is the instantaneous drag area, that is CD into S. That is what is basically KREF as a function of time. So this way the user can actually model the aerodynamics or the inflation profile that the parachute should be taking. So when I model the aerodynamics of the parachute, so I should also so the software or the simulation model should also be able to accommodate the failure scenarios that can actually occur in parachute deployment or during the certain phase of an inflation. Now, in this scenario, we see that the parachute system actually has two canopies. One denoted as serial number 1, another denoted as serial number 2. Now, we see that the serial number 1 remains, so in these images, we can see that serial number 1 continues to be in the same state, whereas serial number 2 we can see that it has continuously it has started inflating. That's what you can see. while the other parachute is in a partially inflated state. So this is a kind of a failure scenario where serial number 2 is going to should be ideally looking similar to serial number 1, but due to a failure that has occurred in limiting the inflation of this serial number 2 parachute has caused some has caused it to continuously inflate. So such a scenario has to be controlled as to it should be able to we should be able to model such scenarios in the simulation. So there are methods by which it can. First of all, I'll tell you why it should be. It's very important because the unexpected inflation of serial number 2 can affect the rate at which serial number 1 can inflate, and this is going to delay, or it can have the capability to prepone certain timelines or certain events, because you can see here that the serial number 2 has completely blanketed serial number 1. So this serial number 1 parachute can actually take more time than what it is supposed to take for it to by the time it reaches its nominal state. So such scenarios have to be considered while developing the simulation model. So, and one other aspect of when we talk about parachutes that we cannot avoid is actually the added mass models. So added mass is so here you can see what I mean by added mass. So whenever a parachute starts inflating, its canopy is going to carry some amount of air. It's going to, because some air is going to get trapped within the canopy, and it should also, in addition to the payload to which it is attached to, this it should also pull these air in as long as the parachute is accelerating. So by the time the parachute enters some steady state, or it reaches, or its acceleration goes to zero, then the effect of this added mass is going to be negligible. But by the time say by the time the bag comes out, the parachute comes out of the bag, it starts inflating. There is a good amount of oscillation during those phases. Definitely, the parachute is going to experience some acceleration. So it is very important that we model this additional virtual mass. So this included mass should be is present only when the parachute is accelerating, as I previously told. So that is why this added mass is actually called as a virtual mass. So this virtual mass can be split into two. One is the mass which is contained in the canopy, and other one is the mass which is present between the suspension lines. So this is called as the included mass, and this is called as the apparent mass. So it is the added mass is basically the summation of included, that is the enclosed, plus this apparent mass. So as I just told, so the parachute so the parachute should develop in a so it should actually develop enough force to handle the payload which is connected to the parachute, as well as this additional mass which is getting trapped. So when I'm predicting the force that is entire, I mean, when I'm modeling the force that is exerted on the parachute, it is important that I include the added mass as well. So from that perspective, it is very important. So as I told, it varies with the state of the parachute. So it is going to have a certain behavior when it is 50% inflated. And at full inflation, it is going to have a certain behavior, but over time, as the steady state begins, it is going to fade away. So, in a way, it can be represented as, rather than the absolute value of the added mass, so it is the added mass rate. So, how does it vary over time is what is very important. If you take the rate, ultimately, when say if you look at the rates, it is going to have a very high value at start of the inflation, and ultimately it is going to go to zero by the time the parachute starts entering into the steady descent. So so this added mass consideration must also be is also very critical when we model the parachute and the payload system dynamics. And one other important reason for modeling this added mass is, I'll just briefly go to the previous slide. So when you consider added mass, it is going to help us predict the time at which this peak force is bound to occur. If say I'm not modeling the added mass, it can the simulation can actually predict it with a some error band. So that is what we understand from our simulation experience. So it should be very accurately modeled in order to capture the what is the peak force and what is the time instant with respect to the start of the parachute inflation at which I can expect this peak force to occur. These are all very important for a user who is interested in modeling this parachute payload system dynamics. So these are the various aspects that are present in the parachute. So yeah, so and lastly, the instantaneous. So there are, I mean, as I told, it can have a different effect during different phases of inflation. So there are actually different shapes by which one can model an inflating canopy. So one can model the canopy to be a sphere or a spheroid, hemisphere and a hemispheroid. But currently there are also the work that is, I mean, there are a lot of emerging work going on to represent the parachute as an ellipsoid. Ellipsoid seems to be becoming a most commonly used shape for predicting the added mass effect currently. Yeah. So yes, now I'm moving on to how the parachute and the payload aerodynamic modeling is very important from the simulation perspective. So as you may see here, so when the payload is in the vicinity of the aircraft, the airflow, so here you can see a very undisturbed airflow going around the aircraft. And but here you can see at the just behind the aircraft, you are going to it is going to experience a good amount of wake. So this wake is basically a dead flow region where the velocities are going to be much lesser compared to the free stream. So we need to know. So when you have lesser velocity, then you ultimately the parachute is going to contribute. It is going to exert very less force on the payload. So this predicting the wake of the aircraft from which I am going to drop is very important for me to decide how many parachutes I want to pull this payload. And that is the first thing. In case if I have an option to go for a bigger line, you can see this riser line connecting the parachute and payload. So I can decide it in such a way that it falls outside the wake region. So for taking such decisions, it is very important we know how the wake I mean the complete aerodynamic behavior in presence of the parent aircraft. So as you may see here that when the payload starts coming out of the ramp, you can see that the airflow here is represented in this direction from right to left. You can see that you have the extractor applying force. In this image, you can see that force transfer has already happened. That is, this is the main parachute. So in case, imagine a situation where this is uh, when this payload is just started tipping. At that moment, the parachute is going to still be connected to this point, and you are also having to, and the payload is going to experience some aerodynamic effect. Though it is not fully out of it, there is going to be partial, some aerodynamic effect. And this effect can become bigger and bigger when your payload size, when your assembly size is very big. So imagine modeling say a 10-meter or a 12-meter payload. So when it starts tipping, when it is half out, you are going to have sufficient length of the payload is already out experiencing the airflow. So it is very important to model how you want to model the aerodynamics of the payload when it is in the vicinity of the aircraft. The current modeling approaches that people typically use is till the ramp clear happens. That is, the payload reaches, I mean, payload clears the aircraft ramp. This payload can be treated as a flat plate. So it is it you, we may not have to since there is not going to be a complete flow surrounding this body. It can be treated as a flat plate. So in that way, the aerodynamics approximations, equations inside the model can be approximated. And that approach seems to be working with whatever simulation that model that we have developed, and it also seems to be good approximate. It seems to be matching well with whatever flight test data has shown. So that is so so this way, like this flat plate approximation, people have lot of approximations to model the aerodynamics when it is in very close vicinity of the aircraft. But one advantage we are going to have once payload clears the ramp is due to its weight. It is usually payloads weigh around 6 to 15 tons. So due to its sheer weight, it is immediately going to clear the vicinity of this wake and is going to have a downward motion. So I mean, we may not have to worry too much about the effect of wake on the payload. So it's only if we are able to model its local till its RAM clear. So that is seems to be that looks like it is sufficient enough to sufficient enough level of fidelity that is required to model the aerodynamics. So it is going to just clear once it is completely out of the it is going to experience the phase change velocity. So yeah, so there are different approaches by which you can actually model the aerodynamics. So you can say if you have a database from wind tunnel tests where you have the say where usually the force coefficients are defined in I mean wind axis system, that is CL, CD, CM. If you have those coefficients for the parachute and payload, those databases can be used to model the payload. Or if the user thinks that the aerodynamics, I mean the angle of attack range is going to be very small, then linearization of coefficients are also possible. Instead of a database, you can just model it using a single slope like Cm alpha, Cl alpha. Instead of a database where Cm as a function of alpha, it can also be just a single value, but that is valid only for a smaller ranges of alpha. Linearization also possible. If you want to model in some cases where the extraction speed is going to be very high and there are going to be Mach number effects on the aerodynamics, you can also model. There should be also an option to model the aerodynamics of the payload and the parachute as a function of Mach number. So it's I mean, so ultimately the simulation model should be able to simulate to predict things from a linear point of view. Also, it should be able to do a 2D, I mean, a two-dimensional interpolation. So it can have it should be so as you may be aware. So its aerodynamics is going to be affected by the angle of attack. Angle of attack is basically its longitudinal axis, and the angle between the an object's longitudinal axis and the velocity vector direction. So based on that orientation, and I'm going to have coefficients defined as a function of Mach number. Or I'm going to have angle of attack. I can also have a side slip angle when I'm experiencing wind or gust, those things. So it should be able to handle scenarios where a coefficient is going to be a function of angle of attack, angle of side slip. It may also have a Mach number. So a very detailed, a very exhaustive model is actually needed to simulate such scenarios. And it's not only just the static coefficients, the damping derivatives are also very important from the modeling perspective. Damping is going to help us reduce the oscillations. Ultimately, the entire system is going to have. So, so, the, so all these things, probably all the thoughts, all such requirements are to be assessed. So before the simulation software is usually developed. Yeah. So now let's move into another interesting topic, which is how to model these connections. Now we have seen that the parachute can be modeled as a single body. It has its own. So there are some forces, some moments that are acting on this, and this is the payload. Imagine this is parachute, and this is the payload. So they both have their own, it is experiencing some force moment, and its trajectory can be computed based on Newton-Euler equations of motion. And so as a discrete time, I'm going to have the trajectory of this. Now, somehow the effect of this should be transmitted to this, and at the same time this effect of this body's effect should be transmitted to the parachute. So that's why that is the precise reason why we have to model the parachute riser, and that is basically a connection which is required in the uh, uh, payload parachute system dynamics. Here, this thick black line you see is nothing but a parachute riser. So, so in dynamics, in such simulation scenarios, these lines are modeled as you may see here is modeled as an elastic connection, meaning those are modeled as a massless spring damper system. So when I say a spring damper system, so you may recollect what I explained in the for the contact model. I am going to have a spring force and a damping force. So spring force is going to develop in so the force in this line is force in this line due to the spring action is going to depend on what is the difference between the line's original length and what is its current length. So it is going to be proportional to the unstretched length of this line and what is the current separation distance between the payload and the parachute, because that is what is going to give me the current distance of the line. So the tension is directly proportional to the distance by which the parachute and payload are separated. Now, as I told, damping also should be included in a system, because when we model spring, it is also the damping is also going to give us some numerical convergence. It is going to help, and it is also it will help us model things in a more physical, even physically damping parameters are important. So in addition to so my damping term is going to contribute. I mean, so basically for the spring force, the distance between the parachute and payload is very important. Now for damping term, I'm going to require the velocity. So so basically the instant. I mean, so when I say velocity, it is the velocity at which the change in length has happened. So that is also very important in modeling the ultimate forces. So the force in this line is going to be say the say this is line is in tension. So this is going to this force should be applied to parachute as well as the payload. So for payload, this is going to act in the opposite direction. So in this connection, so this way tension force is applied in each attachment point along a vector. So that's why you see XP, YP, and ZP. Because these points are usually defined with respect to the CG of the parachute, and this is the CG of the payload with respect to the CG, and I can define what is the attachment point which is going to have this connection. So based on this information, I am going to know what is the current distance between these two. If this distance is going to be more than the actual length, the unstretched length, then I am going to know that this line is in tension. So this way the force in this line are transmitted to the parachute and the payload. So this is a very straightforward approach for riser suspension line, and so here let me just one more explain this phenomenon called a static line. So riser is basically this particular line which connects the payload and the parachute, and suspension lines are those which connects the canopy and this uh, confluence point. And these static lines are nothing but lines which where one end is connected to the aircraft and the other end is connected to the canopy of the parachute. So when you want deployments, when you want a parachute to be deployed in such a manner, as we just saw, I believe we saw that during the initial introduction, that is the gravity drop model. We saw a line, so that line which runs between one end is connected, hard fixed on the aircraft, another one is connected on the parachute canopy. That is what is the static line. Similar approach can be, similar modeling strategy can be applied to those lines as well. So this is one aspect. Now there is another interesting phenomenon which is called as a sling model. So here this is the sling where this is the payload, this is the pallet, and this is payload. This is the entire assembly that I am dropping, and also this is the riser. So I have a parachute here. I have a riser connecting, and I have one confluence point. From this confluence point, I have cables running to all four corners of this cuboid. Now, this point, there are two ways in which one can. The first approach, as you can read from this point, I can model it as an off-body point of this particular assembly. With respect to the CG, I can tell where this particular point is. I can, and it can have certain restrictions. I can allow certain, with certain restrictions, I can model the motion of this particular point. So that is one way. The other way, and I can model so when I'm doing this now, I can model all four, all these links can be modeled as elastic connections. That's the same way as we just saw how riser suspension lines are modeled. So this is one way. Now there is another alternate approach where I can model this as a separate entity. It can be modeled as an off-body point of the payload, and so basically this is a separate body. This is a 3 DOF or a 6 DOF body, and this point can be a separate body, and these connections can be actually defined as elastic connections. So these are the two different methods by which. So this approach is very similar to the way how we initially discussed how parachute can be modeled, where canopy can be separate, this point can be separate body, and you can have connections between these two. So in a similar manner, this problem can also be approached in two different ways as per the user's requirement. And when I'm going to have the confluence body as an off body point, meaning this, I mean, the motion of this particular point is linked with this particular body, strongly linked. When it is an off body point, then then there is no, I don't have to model these four slings actually. I can actually model only two slings for each slide. That is why you see this called as these dotted lines that you see, which is the two-dimensional sling geometry. So it is actually applicable when I'm modeling this point as an off-body point of this payload. Now, based on these are certain logics that I can impose. So when this line is in tension, then I can just exert the force on this edge. When this edge is in tension in this scenario, I can just model force on this. So and ultimately, when this point lies in the same plane as the CG, when it is equidistant, when the angles are same, it makes the same angle with respect to the stoppage, then both are in tension. So ultimately, it is I so in this case the tension can be applied exactly at the CG point of the payload. So this way, there are different kinds of logics modeling approaches can actually be implemented in the sling model. Yeah, and lastly, before moving to the next topic, so these are typically so in modeling the connections, as we previously saw, any massless spring damper system or a spring damper system will require some information of the material line. So based on the material for whatever is your riser materials, you are going to have a set of stiffness coefficient and damping coefficients. So identifying these material properties and these constants are very important, and these are very critical inputs in modeling the in modeling the I would say more than parachute payload as a system. It is very important in modeling the peak load that your parachute can have. If you want to model it as realistically as possible, then these are to be identified. So these coefficients can be actually simulate from simulations. These can be identified using multi-body dynamic simulations like Adams. You have commercial where you can model a line as a using discrete elements. So that kind of a finite element approach can be made in identifying this. That is one approach. Second, if you have the facility to conduct ground static pull test, that is, certain amount of load is actually applied on the rope, on the line on ground to see its behavior. Ultimately, you will get the stress strain curve of the material upon I mean, as you do the static pull test. Based on that stress strain curve, we can actually calculate the stiffness and the damping coefficients, and there are standard methods by which this can be calculated. So that marks the end of the connection. So next topic, we will look more deeply into the atmospheric model. So atmospheric model is as important, modeling this is as important as how the bodies are represented and what are the modeling strategies that we have actually, I mean, what are the things that we have modeled. It's as good as that. So here we will look into two things. One is how the density variation is being catered to. Another one is what if there is a surface, there is a wind variation, or if there is a constant wind. What if the wind varies as a function of altitude? What if its magnitude has a profile? Such scenarios are usually the parachute payload simulation during simulation, or in actual drops. Such scenarios do I mean occur very often. So considering this is very important. So here you can see this. First, let me tell you how density variation is very important. Density, as you see here, is actually used for dynamic pressure calculations in the aerodynamic module. So be it for the density calculation, or if you want to calculate the Mach number, you are going to require the temperature for calculating the speed of sound. So for those reasons, this atmospheric module is very important. And your density, as you see here in this example image, where which shows that how density varies uh, with respect to the altitude. So we have certain experiences where the payloads are dropped from a height of 5 kilometers, as high as 5 kilometers. So you can see the difference in the value at 5 kilometers. So, and there are so in this graph you see two lines. So the red line is actually how the density varies if you are adopting to the international standard atmosphere, and the yellow line actually shows how the density would vary if you are following Indian standards. So basically and there are ultimately the density has to be modeled as a function of altitude. So the user is expected to provide capabilities to model using these two simulations. I mean these two capabilities. In addition to this, off late there are actually there is an interest in the community to use the MET data. MET data is nothing but meteorological data, where at each and every altitude you can actually use some actual measured data as a function of altitude. If you know what is the particular density value that the air is going to have, that can be measured. So it is called as a MET data. So it comes as a standard format actually. So in further simulation modules, we should also be able to cater to such requirements where the user from a meteorological department can get that data and give us that input. The user should be able to directly load that input. That input is going to give us the density as a function of altitude. It is going to give us what is the magnitude of the wind, what is the direction in which your wind is coming. All that information are completely given in that MET data. So this is how the density variation needs to be dealt with. Now next, we'll go ahead with the wind effect. So modeling wind is very much important. And when I say wind, I am assuming only it is generally assumed as horizontal, and its magnitude and direction is defined with respect to true north. So you may see here where a paratrooper is jumping from an aircraft. So you can see that initially he was here, and this is a static line as we just saw. And this parachute, you can see that static line, one end is connected to the aircraft, another end is connected to the parachute canopy, and he is jumping. And you can actually have, so you can say, in case if you can approach this problem with headwind or without headwind, or it can be tailwinds. So it can entirely affect. So when you have winds, either headwind, crosswind, or a tailwind, it is going to affect the time for him to take for the parachute to get deployed and his current orientation. The entire timeline of the drop that would occur in the ideal scenario is going to change. So for me to predict such behaviors, I should be incorporating the effect of wind also. So wind direction usually is given either a constant value, or as I told, it can have a variation with respect to altitude. So in this example image that you see here, so on the x-axis it is the wind velocity, and y-axis we can see that it is the altitude that is given. On the right you can see the westerly winds. It has a completely different profile, and these are the easterly winds. So such capabilities are very important in order for us to predict certain events. And if we are able to predict, then it can also help us in controlling certain events. From that perspective, modeling this is very important. Yeah, so now that we have seen the multiple elements of the parachute payload system dynamics, finally we will see how these fit into one particular simulation framework. It is the entire coupling model structure that we will look at. So this is the typical framework or flowchart that we typically follow for multi-body dynamics, where you have multiple systems, interconnected systems. So as you see here, is a tightly coupled. It's a multi-body dynamics problem, which is very tightly coupled. And as you may see here, your aircraft is going to have an impact on payload. Your payload is going to get affected by aerodynamics and wind. And similarly, your parachute is also going to get affected by aerodynamics and wind. And when these two have, and between these two, we have connections and lines running between them. And its independent motion and motion of payload and parachute will be affected by these forces and moments that we typically have. F stands for both forces and moments, and the x is basically the position and the attitude. That is both linear and angular motion. So you can see the data information flowing between each and every block. So, so this block gives an output based on certain information, and this way we can. So this way, I believe it is possible for you to imagine what kind of a tightly coupled system it is, and to establish such a system. So it is say for example, I have one payload and one parachute. So for either it is a parachute or a payload, I'm going to have one aerodynamic module and I'm going to have a wind module. So the module remains the same. It really doesn't matter whether it is a payload or a parachute. So once I'm making a module ready, it should be generic enough to cater to the requirements of payload and parachute. Payload is just a rigid body aerodynamic module. It's a rigid body. Its reference area is not going to change. Whereas in case of parachute, my aerodynamics should be able to model a varying area, because due to inflation, the parachute is going to have a certain profile. Its drag area is going to change over time. So when I say aerodynamics, it also embeds inflation module inside it. And then we have the wind field, which is again common irrespective of what payload or the parachute is. And then we have certain common modules that can be applied between two objects. So I can actually, when I have this such a module, to be able to capture the contact between the aircraft ramp and payload. Say for tomorrow, I have a scenario where a payload where there are two payloads and one payload, and they have independent motions. Say I have two blocks which sit on top of each other. After a certain time, imagine that they are going to split and they can have independent motion. In that case, I should be able to model the contact between those two In addition to these two contacts, I'm going to have another contact problem to solve between those two assemblies that form the payload. So the contact model, again, once a class is generated, it should be able to handle contacts between any two bodies that I'm going to define. So that is the typical structure or the model structure. So when you have such a complex system to model, the object-oriented programming will be very handy. So when we say object-oriented programming, you can have multiple objects. So here, when you say objects, I can have payload, I can have parachute, I can say I can also model, if I wish to model the dynamics of the aircraft, I can also model the aircraft here. I can have any number of objects. And imagine this is, it can, I can have any number of payloads and each payload having its own sets of parachutes. So it's not just a linear or it's not just a simple problem. It can become very complex. So in that case, using object-oriented programming makes the problem very easy. And so when I say it becomes easy, it is once you make a class, then you can use that class for you can inherit that class when you create an object. Say for a payload, say if I don't want to model aerodynamics, I want only coupling and contact. I can just ignore the aerodynamic module class for payload. For parachute, again I say if I do not want any added mass to be class effect to be added, I can just ignore the added mass model and just only use this. And say for tomorrow, if I want some added mass effect, some varying, if you want added mass tomorrow to be implemented on a payload, say for example a payload falls, you say on some water surface, and it is going to continue its trajectory even inside the water. So you have a two-phase problem. You need to predict trajectory in the air. It's going to land on water, and then it is going to continue. In that case, you will have to model payload having some additional mass because of water. In that case, it becomes like an added mass problem. Tomorrow, you may have to also include added mass effect for a payload. So in that case, having classes, having objects very properly defined helps us inheriting for this object. I can use any class I want. So the information communication between object and whatever effect I want to model becomes very easy and seamless when we go for object oriented programming. And so far in my experience, we have actually worked on two platforms. One is a Python based package, another one is a C++ based package. So I mean, uh, as you may have understood, the entire simulation problem is much faster when you go for a when you in the using the C++ code. We have seen that it has enormous benefits of modeling it using a C++ kind of a program rather than having packages or interpreters like Python. It makes the entire process much faster because imagine a parachute extracted or a payload extracted from a parachute till touchdown. It can take a whole lot of time, up to 40 seconds. The simulation is expected to run till 40 seconds with a time step of assuming that you are using Rangikutta 4 for integration. Then entire process to get over it is going to take 40 seconds the actual simulation time. So when you think of such massive simulations, it is always better to go implement these things using say C++ or C type programming languages. So yeah, so this is the overall brief of the multi-body dynamics and the entire coupling of multiple different solvers and the integration. So yeah, if there are any questions in for the sections, I can answer those.